The Lost Signals looks at
This
horror films
is God.
that were the early roles of famous actors.
You've been
And another Halloween sequel.
I think Michael is under the influence of an evil rune.
With in-depth analysis,
Trite, rhetorical, cliched, inane.
adult content,
Sniff it or he shoots you.
adult language,
He played pogo on his lawn.
and spoilers.
My birth cry will be the sound of every phone on this planet ringing in unison.
Join us.
Hello, and welcome to another MOTS-O-Ween, where we are going to take famous actors, people who have now made it, and discuss their early horror movies.
Springboard horror movies, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the flaccid bosom of the lost and introduce to my disciples of the watch, Jonathan Ian Manzer. Scott Thurlow.
One of us. Oh, wait, wrong film.
And Stephen Hermosi.
And I await the baby killing of this episode.
And tonight we are doing the classic from 1981. It's the third film in the original Omen trilogy. It stars Sam Neill. It's called The Final Conflict, or Omen 3, The Final Conflict. And we are going to celebrate Sam Neill. And
Fucking A, we will.
Spoiler, it's not The Final Conflict. There's two more Omen movies after this.
Well, yeah, of course there's. That's why I said the first trilogy.
Yeah.
And does anybody have a funny log line?
So I sort of came up with them just previously offhand, like Antichrist Incorporated. You know, like that's what's happening here. So we'll expand upon that, but I think it's fitting.
And Disciple Manzer, would you like to give us the plot?
Well, Damien's grown up, and he runs a corporation. But lo and behold, Jesus is coming back. So he is using his corporate resources to make sure Jesus doesn't come back.
Gotta murder the Nazarene.
To root out, though.
And meanwhile, some homeless priests are trying to kill him with some knives.
Magical daggers, I suppose, also involved, yes.
Jesus wins in the end. The end of the story. That's basically what happens in this.
No, I mean, you're right. It's a very straightforward plot. And yeah, Chris, like, yes, it's so I thought you might have said it. There's one version where it's just called The Final Conflict, but then they realize, oh shit, we have to make sure people know it's an Omen movie. So it's called Omen 3, The Final Conflict, obviously. And yeah, so Damien Thorne is now grown up and is running his corporation, as you said. And I think, like, I was entertained by this film. I've never seen this. I've seen the first two Omens, and I remember them, like, okay-ish at best. But because of the conceit of this year's theme, if you will. And yeah, I love Sam Neill always. I'll have more to say about it. But, like, plot-wise, I think it was, like, solid enough. Like, I'm looking at a fairly strong 3. It made sense. Like, it wasn't too long. It made sense for what it was.
Very strong 3.
No, I said a very strong 2. I'm sorry. I meant to say
Right.
my bad. Yes, very strong 2. Certainly not a 3, to be clear. But, like, for what it was, and I'm sorry, Eve, but I have to steal something from you that you said about a previous film we did earlier this year. It's weird and entertaining enough to watch. So I enjoyed it, like, for the most part, 80-90% of the way through. And yeah, like, I like how they had, like, Damien Thorne doing his corporate thing, like trying to root out, like, the Christ child, like getting all his corporate cronies and, like, disciples, like you said, Chris, to go do it in England, which apparently is where the Christ child is being born. And also then a bunch of, like you said, like, rogue priests with magical daggers. The only thing that can kill Damien, they're trying to assassinate him. Like, that was a fun subplot. So, like, yeah, I was entertained by it. Strong 2. Go on.
Luckily, they had 7 of those daggers because they were very bad at murdering him.
Well, of course, Steve-O, the magical number 7, obviously, like, it ties into all that, you know. Like.
But point of order, was the first Omen called The Omen? Or just Omen?
I think it was called The Omen.
So they dropped the at some point.
Yeah.
It's an Omen, not the Omen.
Exactly.
Just wanted to, like, I thought it was called The Omen, and then I saw this was Omen. I was looking for The Omen 3 when I was trying to find this movie, and I couldn't find it. It was like, all
well,
right, just
yeah.
Omen 3.
First of all,
And
never
again-
put "the" in the search titles, but yeah.
This is also not the final conflict. So,
Right, exactly.
It's just a final conflict.
A final
like you said.
conflict. Somebody's final conflict. Certainly all the people that he kills. It's their final conflict. Anyway, yeah, no, I thought this was a Scott, I'm going to kind of agree with you. It was a plot for sure that made sense. I'm going to give it probably a week or two, but I'm probably going to stick with a 2 as well. I think the best part of this movie is all the hamming it up that Sam Neill does for sure.
Obviously.
But it has enough of a plot. And actually, I thought this movie was better than I thought it was going to be. Mm-hmm. So I have to give it a little bit of credit for that. Not that it was amazing by any means, but you know, it held up for a third movie of a second-rate horror, you know, franchise. Yeah, I like held up pretty well. And yeah, I am going to give it a 2.
This is about as average of a horror movie as you get. And I could argue the points that are good with this and bad, but they kind of nullify each other.
Out, right?
It's just a 50. I think it has like a 5 out of 10 on a lot of, or a 2 out of 4 all the reviews. It's weird. It's not bog standard. It's just not great, not terrible, just straightforward. Okay. And
swamp standard.
Right, so I'm giving it a 2 because that's what it deserves.
I feel it's about right. Go ahead, Damien Thorne himself.
I was gonna say that this is. I agree with you. This is a kind of an average horror film. I think Ian said it best. It was not serious enough, nor was it campy enough. But it is completely buoyed, and I'm glad I did stick with this because I was deciding if I should get this or another film. That I stuck with this because it is completely buoyed by Sam Neill. Mm-hmm. And it's really funny because you could tell, I don't know, at least it's my interpretation of his portrayal of Damien. He was a great Damien Thorne. However, his I don't know if it was the director, if it was the script or what, but there were certain times, and I guess we'll get to it during dialogue, where he'd get wide-eyed and crazy, and like he'd kind of like look up, and like you'd be like, he's thinking paycheck.
Always being a method actor. Either way, it works.
Just a little context for this. The Omen
wanted to get out of that little apartment in LA and into a house, you know.
And he did well, actually, I think it was Australia to England, then to so he's traveled quite a bit. But
sure.
Just for some context, the original Omen was released in 1976, where he was. I don't remember how old he was, but he was a teenager in 1978. So he's a 32-year-old adult in 1981, and they did a nice little retcon without throwing too much of the dates. I think he threw out 1962 at some point.
I didn't even think about that, Chris. Like that's much more deep than any other random audience member would even care about. But
when I first saw this, it was on HBO in like 1982. We had it, like it was on all the time, so my friends and I would watch it and laugh our asses off at it. I'm glad it didn't disappoint. I think it is definitely worthy of a 2. Whether it's an average 2 or a strong 2, I don't think it should go below average. I definitely don't think it should go above strong. So a 2 is definitely the best way to go with this one.
Agreed.
All right.
Okay. All right. Would you like to discuss the themes?
Certainly. Jesus rules, Antichrist can suck it, I suppose. Of course, it's framed around a religious thing. Like you have to, like, not have to, but if you're going to get into this movie, that's what it's about. Like it's about the prophecy, if you will, which also quickly we also reviewed the prophecy itself, which is sort of the same thing. Like the Antichrist has come to power. It's a struggle between him and the reborn Christ, like the second coming. So like it really is a straight up like sort of good and evil, like pretty much, because that's what always happens in these types of religious thriller horror films. So the thing is though, like I'm not sure if like that's the surface level of it. Like I said, it's always going to be stapled on there by default, just by de facto nature of any story like this. So while I don't think it's like devoid of it, like it is exactly what you think it is, because again, it's always been that. The best way I can say it. So I'm not really sure on this one. Like I could honestly go either way, but it's going to be a softer one, end or zero, not or end, right? One of them, but just I'll let you go in a second, Chris. But yeah, I mean, on my notes, like I had the biggest question mark for this one, only because of the fact, like by nature, again, that's how this kind of story always goes. And while I found the protagonist fascinating, which we'll talk about in a second, the theme, like the message of the movie itself is like good and or Jesus will always overcome, I guess. But like it doesn't always sit well. It doesn't like it's almost like too black and white for me in a sense. So I'm not opposed to either one. With that, I will open it up. What do you guys make of it?
I think there's something I noticed last night, right from the part where the first 10 minutes of the film is kind of like going over how they acquired the knives from the museum that was burned down at the end of.
Yeah.
Sure.
Then we get before we introduce to Damon, we're open up to a Thorn commercial, and
PR video.
It's showing like like the disruption of the world. And the first thing I thought is like, this is pretty topical from 1981. And when Ian was watching it over earlier today, he's basically said the same thing. And
I got you guys.
And then when he talks to the president, he tells his right hand man, he's like, I'm going to be ambassador of England because prophecy tells me so. And the president is like, oh, we're going to make you the ambassador of England. He goes, I can't accept the job because I'd have to give up my thing of my control of Thorn Industries. And the president's like, Apasha, don't worry about that.
Shady backroom deals with the devil, obviously, yeah.
So
shades of Trump, right?
Well, it's not even shades of Trump. Oh God, it's not even shades of Trump. It's like, it's shades of political corruption. And like, if you follow it, you don't get a lot of, there's a lot of stuff they're talking about with like Israel and Egypt. And it's just like, there's a timeless nature of it. So if I'm going to go with the theme, and please, I'm just throwing my 2 cents in there, that there's this element of like overall political corruption and money. And even when they're talking about the media in terms of like, basically at one point, some guys covering up for the deaths of the babies, trying to mitigate it, minister of some department. And, so you get into a lot of the cover up of the politics and the media. If it bleeds, it leads, and so forth. Aside from the religious overtones, I found it, being an adult now as opposed to a 12-year-old when I first saw this, I'm like, and getting a lot of the political corruption, media bias. So in a weird way, I'm actually going to give this a 1 because it really spoke to me a lot now.
Yeah. So I agree with you completely, Chris. Steve-O, I got more shades of Pete Buttigieg than I did Trump. But the idea of, I actually felt this had a very anti-corporate message. Specifically corporate influence on politics, corporate influence over world events. They basically, like the idea of using relief workers as a front for
furthering your own
domestic change in cultures. Part that he's the one who blew up the dam in order to, or at least has influenced it in order to spark a war between Israel and Egypt. Yeah, some of it is timely for that era, but so it is timeless. But it also goes back to the thing that every single generation thought that theirs was the worst generation and the end of the world. So this is true for the final conflict. And it turns out that not only do they make sequels to this, but every single generation thinks it's the final conflict that they're dealing. So I actually think that almost the religious angle is almost incidental to the major themes of this work.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think they really wanted to talk about politics and corporate lust, like greed and money lust, basically. And I think that it talked about that at times pretty well, and at times it was a little bit sloppy, but without going into a whole diatribe, I think that it did a fairly decent job at addressing some themes. I feel like it threw a lot of stuff at the wall at points, and enough of it stuck, I think, for me to give it a 1 on themes in terms of that. So I'll agree with you guys on most of what you said. I don't have too much new to say about it, so I'm just gonna say a 1.
All right, that's all fair. Like, it's funny because at first I was gonna almost say like the corporate political stuff was like background to the religious stuff, but I think as you guys talked out, it might actually be reversed the more I think about it, and that means I think that is a stronger theme at least, and I think it's enough for a 1 for me.
There's an irony, and Damien at one point says that the Christians are too dogmatic in going to the prophecy, and this had a lot to say, but it was too dogmatic to the Omen franchise.
Yeah.
No, actually, I like that. That's a good cap off. So yeah, I think I will end at a 1 in for themes, and it was solid.
And quick note, nothing. It didn't. Putting it to any political figure never occurred to me. Beth immediately twigged to John Edwards. Twigged to
Visually, they're very similar.
Trump, which says to me the level of political corruption is known.
My basic thought on that was just like he refused to give up his company, give up the money that he was making in his company when getting into political power, right? Like that was the idea that I had.
And that's a timeless thing.
Yeah, we go down a rabbit hole on this. I'm
Anyway,
sorry.
1 for themes though. You guys convinced me. Like, you guys
1's
made a
all
good
around,
point.
I think.
So yeah.
And Steve, would you like to tell me about the antagonist?
Sure. This is an interesting question, right? Because the protagonist of this movie is the
Technically,
like ultimate evil that eventually gets defeated, right? Sorry, spoilers. But like I don't know, what's the antagonist? The fucking ragtag group of
yes,
jag-off like
yes.
fucking priests and shit that don't do anything. Like I can't find a good antagonist for this movie. Like none of them.
Jesus Christ.
I guess Jesus, but Jesus didn't do shit either. He just like hovered over him in victory at the end. He's like a Muhammad Ali in that fucking famous picture. If Muhammad Ali actually didn't do the fight and just like hovered over somebody at the end, like I don't know. I don't see like a good antagonist to this. The only one that actually did shit was his I forget what her name is, but his girlfriend, we'll say in quotes, who stepped up for all the actual antagonists and fucking killed the motherfucker.
I thought it was Kate something, but
I'm probably gonna give antagonist a 0 to be honest. But what do you guys think?
it's interesting because you're right. Like, assumingly, like the movie follows the perspective of the actual Antichrist, and like, yes, it bleeds into the next question, sure. And yeah, like the ragtag group of like, rebel priests being like, we're the only ones who know what's up. We need these daggers to go kill them.
They're completely worthless, all of them.
But hold on. The Spectre, as he mentioned, right? So like, it of course is a callback to the Bible itself and to like pseudo historical like things where he knows that the second coming of Christ is about to happen. Therefore, he has to murder all the firstborn children, etc. And that is antagonizing because he can't find the Christ child, and he knows as his power wanes, like vice versa. So like I felt that Sam Neill as Damien was antagonized by the fact he's trying to get all these to murder all the babies, if you will. Like I know it's somewhat flippant, but that's what his struggle was. So like,
he's antagonized by the fact that he could only murder 98% of the babies in Britain that were born on that day.
But how many children? Like you have to give props to Jesus for playing this gambit. I'm willing to sacrifice hundreds of children in order to secure.
And Sam Neill even says that to the statue.
To do what? I feel like Jesus was like, oh, thank God this worked out at the end. He was like wiping sweat from his brow. He's like, oh, somebody killed this motherfucker. So somebody out of left field came by and like won it for us in the in the ninth inning, the bottom of the ninth.
Yeah,
but like it was like nobody was up to the challenge the entire fucking movie, and then this chick just comes out of nowhere and stabs him in the back. It's like, all right, that works out, I guess. But
what I'm saying is like I felt that he was antagonized throughout the film because he was trying so hard to retain his power to win the battle of the Antichrist versus the Second Coming. So like, well, maybe I can't point to one thing specifically. The priest thing is a subplot, like, and they were bumbling and ineffectual for the most part, but I still felt his antagonism. Given that we basically have a villain protagonist, really, in this instance. So, like, I think it's enough for me for a 1, but I don't begrudge anyone who gets a 0. So
I feel like his own imagination about how effective Jesus was going to be was his biggest antagonist.
He played himself.
Yeah, maybe.
Right, exactly. He
That's
played
still
himself.
enough for a 1. Congratulations,
Played yourself, Damien.
You played yourself, Antichrist, but I still think that counts because he felt antagonized. So that's all I got to say.
If I was more charitable toward this film, it would get a 1. But I like to think that I'm thinking more about this than perhaps the people who made this did. So I'm going to have to give it a 0 just because.
Totally fair. Yeah. What do you got, Chris?
I was gonna say, as far as being ineffectual, like the priests, I guess we could talk about it a little more in supporting, but I noticed that all the priests end up getting themselves killed, be it for their incompetence. The priest ends up getting Kate Reynolds, and that's the woman's son killed. I can see
yeah, that's right.
Everybody's point, but the truth of the matter is, I'm gonna fall short of a 1 on this one. I think I'm gonna go with this.
Man, see, now like you guys like you make really good points, and I know like I'm trying to remove my enthusiasm a bit, like because that's how I looked at it. But I think you are like more right. I think you're convincing me. So like, yeah, Chris, I think I'm gonna follow suit with you, like mostly for what you said and built upon the points that you guys just made. That it's a pretty like over the line, like limps falls back, if you will, a la the bridge guy who falls off a bridge into a 0, but softly, if you will. Yeah, I think that's well said. Because so you mark it a 0, dude.
Steve-O?
0, yeah.
Yeah, because I was gonna say we're supposed to be rooting against Damien. It's a weird little thing they had to do with this film.
Exactly.
It is like an interesting way that they juxtaposed his, like, the main character of this is, I guess he's your protagonist, but he's like evil incarnate, and you're supposed to be rooting against him.
Right, Steve. Technically, he's the ultimate villain, but yet you're following his story, and thus it like garners some.
But it's also Sam Neill's performance, which we're about to get, which is a good segue into the next.
Which we'll talk about in a moment.
Indeed.
The protagonist in this is Damien Thorne. And if I'm giggling a lot, it's because Beth and I watched it last night, and we watched it again with Ian today, and it just gets funnier.
Every time I see it.
But no, I actually think, as I think Beth and I pointed out last night, and once again, Ian reiterated exactly what we said last night, there's a lot of expository dialogue.
Yeah.
There's a fair bit for sure, yep.
But the thing is, it is Damien who is delivering it. And
not always.
Yeah, I'm all right. Yeah, that's true. The
priest number 1
has a fair bit of exposition to himself. Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, lead priest does it.
Head priest guy. Yeah.
Exposition too. But the thing is, this totally goes to Sam Neill's delivery, and I am gonna give the actor a little more gravitas for this series that we're doing right now, because we are specifically naming horror films that may have been an early role for actors that later had a bigger name. So therefore, I do kind of have to give a lot of credit to Sam Neill for his portrayal of Damien, who really took seriously the stuff that needed to be taken seriously, and really just went with the stuff that was just over the top. Because there are some, we're going to get to this when we get to dialogue. There is just certain deliveries that he had. You could tell, I don't know if it was the director or if it was his instincts, and I want to kind of give it
A little both, maybe.
but he really always knew how to play a scene. And there was one point on the bridge where one of the priests gets knocked off the horse, and before he sends a bunch of beagles to kill the other priest, before he gives the command for the beagles, he kind of turns his head to the side and is just like, get him. And there's this great mix of menace and boredom, which really plays, not only kind of gives like a meta thing on it, because it kind of in a weird way conveys my whole thing about what Sam Neill was doing at any given point of this film, but also what it would be like for a devil who is the son of Satan, who is just playing this game with people who do not know how to play a game, where he's kind of like, I'm enjoying this, but all right, let's just end this. So I'm definitely going to give this a very strong one. The character I thought was a decent protagonist, but I think Sam Neill really elevated this role.
I mean, yes, certainly. Like, I mean, this is the reason, one of the major reasons you picked this is because it stars Sam Neill, and at least for us, me and you, Chris, personally, and I think you and E and Steve as well. Like, yeah, I've always loved him as an actor. I've never seen this movie previous to this, but it was a great pick for that. And yeah, he brings a lot of charisma and, you know, just like you said, gravitas. Like, he just jumps into whatever role it might be, even if it's somewhat ridiculous on paper, if you will. So, of course, I'm giving it a 1. And yeah, like, while there are times in which he chooses scenery, but I think it makes sense within the greater framework of the film.
He's certainly Charlton Heston's in
yeah, for sure, right? I mean, but that sort of like elevates it, like you said, to a degree, like versus a possible different actor that it could have gotten. So yeah, it goes back, like, he might have played himself, but that means, at least in terms of narrative and antagonist, but that means he's still playing it awesomely. So yeah, I don't have much more to say. So maybe the strongest one of the film is Sam Neill's performance, and whatever was on paper, he again, like, you know what, Chris, it reminded me, I can see shades of like how he took like perhaps what he did here and then did it also in Event Horizon, like something like that, right? So like, yeah, he embraces that shit, and like, he's almost reminds me of like
madness.
Yeah, he almost, exactly, that too, Steve. Yeah, good call as well. You know, I like that one. We did that one in the previous Halloween, but it's almost like a Christopher Walken kind of a thing, just not to that degree, like the grace of that power. But I feel like he reads the script, he's like, here's how I'm gonna play it. I'm just gonna like embrace it, do over the top, but just ride that line to not go over the line, if you will.
It's certainly a Christopher Walken from The Prophecy.
Yeah. And so it reminded me of that too. So yeah, all that to say, very strong one, Sam Neill / Damien Thorne.
I just have a very quick thing to say, that the one reason you would see this movie is his performance.
Yep.
That's the only reason
that up.
it still has relevance to today.
I agree. I think that Sam Neill's performance in this is pretty damn good, and speaks to his later performances for sure, as you mentioned, Scott. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give him a 1. I really enjoyed any time that he was giving you like over the top speech. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, like he was the draw of this, or he should have been the draw of this movie if he wasn't at the time, and he certainly is now. So like, for me,
absolutely.
So I'm gonna give him 1.
He's the most compelling part. So yeah.
So that's 1s all around then.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. And that brings us back to Ian with supporting characters.
I think a lot of what we just said about Sam Neill's performance is also an indictment of the supporting cast. There's some people there who are okay. There's no, I don't think anyone had a terrible performance aside from perhaps the Keystone Priests. But overall, no one, I think, has, it's narratively Damien's movie, and actress wise, outside of that, no one will leave an impression on me besides Sam Neill's thing. So I might have to give this a 0.
This one's difficult because I agree with that as is, but I felt as if I especially liked his assistant. I'm sorry, Chris, I don't know the actor's name. I don't even remember the character's name really, but Damien's right-hand man. I thought he did a good job, but I thought collectively, and Kate, whatever, the reporter from the BBC that he meets and sort of like seduces / corrupts, and especially her kid. And I thought even the kid did an okay job. He even looked like Damien from the original ones. Of course, they were going for that. But I feel as if collectively they did an okay job. But you're right. None of them is stand out. And compared to Sam Neill, there's almost no comparison. So
also, Sam Neill's greatest performances there is him playing off a statue.
That's true. Like the Jesus statue might as well have been
fucking.
I mean, like I
cross.
said, it's a good point. Like, so I'm sort of torn between like giving them all collectively a 1, but none of them being stand out like individually to garner a 1 on their own. So that's like I'm wavering. So that's all. With that, what do you guys go?
I'm gonna say I can't do it. I gotta give the supporting a 0. Like all of these characters, there were decent moments.
Even the Boy Scout killers.
For a bunch of them, especially the Boy Scout killers.
Right.
But there were decent moments for a lot of the supporting characters, but like none of them really stood out to me as like characters that I'm gonna remember, or like what I'm gonna remember about this movie. If I am gonna remember anything, is Sam Neill. So I think that his the reporter that he seduces is okay, and his assistant is also okay, and to good at certain points, but not like in a long enough timeline in the course of this movie for me to like give it a 1. So I'm gonna give it a 0.
You got Chris.
All right. Well, I have the. Well, first of all, it's Harvey Dean, his right-hand man.
Okay.
The lead priest is DiCarlo, played by Rossano Brazzi.
And he's fine too, actually. I liked his little scenes when he was there, but
I'm also going to tell you this is from hindsight of 38 years ago. But when I think of this film, not only do I think of Sam Neill, because after this, Sam Neill, Ivanhoe, and then all the way up to
Jurassic Park.
Yeah. Another great Sam Neill performance at the mediocre movie.
What? Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah,
talk about that later, but
we'll talk about that another time.
But the thing is, when I think of this movie, I also think of DiCarlo a lot. I thought he was the supporting exposition, But I thought Kate Reynolds. If Kate Reynolds was supposed to be the main supporting character, I'd give it a 0 because I thought she was completely uninteresting and offered very little.
It was fairly flat.
For her son. But I really, they were not an effective. He was not a completely effective foil for Sam Neill, but he did over the years. Looking back on this film, these were the 2 characters I remembered. And again, this is complete hindsight. I am completely acknowledging it. If I'd seen this film today, I'd probably be on your guy's side. However, I was really looking forward to seeing him as well. So I am going to give this a 1.
That's completely fair. I think I'm going to side with you guys, though, with Ian and Steve-O. Like, give it a softer 0, but I think at the end of the day, it just didn't quite get there.
Yeah, as I said, if it wasn't for 30,
I got you. I feel you.
And Scott, would you like to talk about the dialogue?
I would love to, my disciples. Yeah, so like, here's the thing, and I've said this before. On paper, it's like okay, even maybe a little bit stilted, but because of the quality and the way that Sam Neill embraces it in this role, it elevates it. And yes, you guys are certainly right that they had to set up some exposition, like he's reading the prophecy from the Bible to Harry Dean or whatever the guy's name is. You just said, Chris, Harry Dean Stanton, assistant guy, and the priests are like, "Oh, these daggers are only they could kill the Antichrist, etc." But when he's like full on Sam Neilling it, like it's compelling. Like you can't look away, and it's very very engaging. So like, give him a lot of the credit. And like the other characters were fine. They did what they could with what, again, the script called for the characters to say and do. So, I mean, it's 80% Sam Neill for sure. Like, don't get me wrong. You got to give him all the credit in the world for when he just embraces it, goes all out, goes, like you said, Charlton Heston, eat all the scenery, because it's, you know, it's an Omen film. Like, it's supposed to be like epic in that sense. So I don't see how you can't give it a 1 only because of that. But I do understand that it is mostly only because of that. So that's where I lie.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead, guys.
Yeah, I basically agree with that. I think that's the crux of this dialogue thing, is Sam Neill crushes his lines of dialogue for the most part. Does a good job on, especially on his like monologue scenes.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
And or even like when he's like talking to a crowd or whatever, like whatever it is, I think that is good enough to give dialogue a 1 on its own, and I'm gonna stick with a 1.
Ian?
Oh yeah, I agree.
There's a monologue he gives when he's talking to the statue of Christ on the cross, and I think it was the part where he said, "You were born. He was vomited from a woman's."
The gaping wound, a woman's gaping wound, or something like that.
Yeah, it's some intense language, but yeah.
I love when he grabs the crown of thorns, like just delivers like several more lines, like, and like looks at his hands as he walks away.
Yeah, it's all incredible. Again, he embraces it, and like he just elevates it in a way that I don't think many other actors could have at the time, and that's why we're springboarded him into stardom, I would say.
Yeah.
Again, it's because the theme of this series is to highlight an actor, and he did really deliver it. And Steve-O, to your point, I will drive deeper the thorns into your rancid carcass.
So good.
Yeah, in other hands it could come off as like stilted, but he just like sells it so well, and you got to give it credit there.
Doing the scene or delivering it with sincerity, he really does execute.
Mm-hmm.
So, right. So it's 1s all around for dialogue?
Yeah.
Okay, which brings us to Steve-O with style.
This is an interesting question. I don't know what I'm going to give it yet. I thought the movie looked all right. I don't know if it was. I honestly don't remember anything about the soundtrack or the score. I think I'm probably going to give this a 0. I just wasn't all that super interested in what was going on stylistically throughout it. And I thought at some points it was a little bit like, I don't know what the right word is. Not good. not good, but like just not up
memorable.
to like higher standards of film, you know, like I thought that it was kind of just okay in terms of style, and like there were some shots that looked good, and there were some shots that I was like, why is this here, you know? So I don't know, what do you guys think?
All right, so you mentioned what I said earlier when I came out of the film, that there's 2 ways to play kind of occult films. You can either be super serious about it, or you can be campy about it. And this was somewhere in the middle. No, because split the difference is a better term for that. And where it wasn't, there's occasional campy moments, like when actually one of my favorite deaths in this is when the kids are playing with the ball, and the ball hits the woman in the head in her carriage. Or someone gets in my car. They had those moments, and then they have very kind of attempts at being a actual legitimate Omen follow. Omen was a serious horror film when it came into the occult. I wish everyone took on the Sam Neill mentality when dealing with this. However, I will say this, though, is that this is a horror film, and the horror angle of this was absent. It was entertaining for Sam Neill's performance. It wasn't suspenseful. It wasn't terrifying. The death scenes were okay to pretty bad. There was no memorable death scenes. It was more aside from like yeah, beagles kill people. The guy gets thrown off a horse, but it's like where I think of the Omen or where like the pane of windows slices the guy in half type thing. Like that's a memorable horror scene. I'm not going to keep any of these with me. I wasn't entertained by the viscera of a horror film. So I think it failed at its base as a horror film. So I'm going to give it a 0.
No, I will keep the plastic wrap one with me. I will say that. That one I'm going to remember.
It's fucking absurd. But, like, I mean, I mostly agree with E. Like, I was sort of wavering with this one coming into it. But, like, while the shots and stuff looked okay and fine, like, you're right, like, some of the deaths, like, they're amusing, but it sort of, like, goes beyond it's campier more than not, and the movie wants them to be serious. Now, I will say, Steve-O, you mentioned the music. Like, I thought the music was pretty good. Like, it's the callback that you'll see after, like, oh, like, it's that kind of shit, like, that's always been in the Omen, but it was
Latin.
Just, yeah,
oh,
exactly.
Latin.
It was just, like, there to be there. So, like, while it did match, of course, because it's the series and the trilogy that it is, it didn't really, it neither detracted nor did it add much, really. So
didn't hit me much.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Say,
like, I wrote down, like, music is still cool, but is that enough for it? I don't think so at this point. And yeah, like, again, it's not shot badly, but I think the point you raised, again, E, that, like, it doesn't quite encapsulate the horror of what you might think of when you're going into, like, an Omen movie. I think it's all what we just said in the previous question. So yeah, maybe softer 0, but I'm looking at that for now. So go ahead, Damien Thorne himself, Chris.
Your hair is transformed throughout this episode, by the way.
There's only so much you can do.
Now you look at the kid and not Sam Neill.
Exactly. You can only do with what you got.
All good.
I've got thick, luxurious hair, so
long, beautiful hair. Go on.
But to Ian's point, you think about, like, the original Omen, and I'm even a fan of Damien Omen 2. It's not quite as strong as the first film, but I think it's a decent film. The death scenes were well shot, but they were also hilarious death scenes. Like
Wilhelm screams. If I didn't say that,
when the ball hits the woman in the face and the stroller goes rolling down, it's hilariously shot, but it's shot like you would shoot a comedy film. And the plastic wrap flaming priest reminded me like of a Simpsons thing where it's just like, not only is there one sheet of plastic, but there's another one, and there's crepe paper sets. I mean, and he was literally swinging back and forth like a pendulum. Yeah. But I am also going to say, Jerry Goldsmith is probably my favorite composer. He has influenced me immeasurably. He won an Academy Award for the original Omen soundtrack, which is
certainly, and I can see that.
He did Omen 2, which is great. He did Alien, and which was conducted by Lionel Newman, which this was as well. He did Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and then after this movie, he did Poltergeist. So you've got these incredible scores, and then you've got this one right in the middle.
Yeah.
The problem is, when the film started, I was like, Jerry Goldsmith knocks it out of the park again. Lionel Newman's conducting it like he did with Alien. But then all of a sudden, it's just like it
sort of fades away.
Well, the thing was, he just kept repeating the theme, and I feel like Jerry Goldsmith is kind of was just like, looked at the script, wrote a couple pieces of music, and said, "Bye, I'm going to go score Poltergeist.
Pay me, peace." Yeah.
No, but what I'm saying is, it's
almost felt like an asshole. I thought you were gonna like love this.
Like, it did not as a piece of music. It did not feel like a complete thought.
Omen 3, the contractual obligation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The final contract.
The final obligation.
Richard Donner
nice.
as on as a producer again. He went from the Omen to Superman. So I'm going to give this a 0. But I really want to pay homage to Jerry Goldsmith and
certainly. Yeah, again, like it's
it was one.
His career is long and storied, and this one just doesn't quite get to all the other ones done. So
investigation in a string of incredible. So I think that zeros all around.
Yep.
And
Bring it on home.
do I recommend this film? I recommended this film to us. Again, Scott, I knew you and I are definitely big Neil fans.
But you're under no final obligation, Chris.
But I am under no final obligation. However, watching it again, the pacing wise, the first right up until his big speech where he talks about talks to the disciples of the watch, where he talks about the flaccid bosom of Christ. After that, the thing goes down, and the ending is absolutely absurd. It becomes completely heavy-handed. So the last 20 minutes of this film is really awful. But I'm kind of leaning on a softer one because I did recommend it. And because again, this is the hindsight of from when I saw this when I was 12. I do remember this film. There's things that stuck with me.
I
was actually really looking forward to watching this again. So I'm gonna probably give it a 1 unless somebody could talk me out of it.
No,
So, Chris, are you saying? Hold on, briefly, Chris, are you saying that 3 Bible quotes at the end of this movie makes it heavy-handed? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying
Was it 3 or 2? I forget. It felt like 3 if it was only 2.
It might have been 3, but definitely 2 for sure.
Yeah, I might as well just say I'm probably not going to recommend this. It's a fine movie to put on in the background on Halloween or something, but it's not a movie that I would go out of my way to watch by any means.
Oh, Chris, you said a bunch of stuff that was cut out. But never mind. And you were responding to Steve-O, but you got cut out.
Sorry about that.
So never mind. Since you don't seem to have a response, I recommend watching YouTube clips of Sam Neill's performance in this. I don't recommend investing the hour 48, I believe the film was,
that's exactly what
to
it is.
watch
Wow, good memory.
The entire thing, because what highlights are here. The parts don't make up the sum. So yeah,
this one's like not tough, but like it's sort of on the line. Like I would say something like I'd recommend it to a select number of people, like based on their personality and like know
if
their.
You're an Omen completionist.
Yeah, or if you're like, hey, I like Sam Neill. What movie should I watch of his? Like, check out the one that put him on the board, or like at least started putting him on the map. But like, is it? I don't know. Like I said at the outset, something like stealing something from you. Like, it's entertaining enough, like weird enough to watch, but it's not. It's like almost average in that sense. So like I could almost coin flip it, but I guess I would like do my old like 55 or 45-55 split, like 55 being a very soft 0. It's not bad, it's not terrible, but nor is it amazing, nor is it like required shit. So
it's
you're
okay.
Right. You're right. I think watch a YouTube like compilation of like the best bits of it, and like that's probably all you need. So yeah, softer 0, just for that reason. So
you guys talked me into it. I'm going to give it a 0, and because the reason is when I thought of this film about recommending it, because I've not really recommended it. I remembered it, but I didn't recommend it. But
I mean, you did it for the theme of this year, but yeah.
For the theme of this year, but would I really actually go to somebody and say, watch this film? I'd probably be like, you got to watch the YouTube clips, or if this film even came up in conversation, let's put it that way.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm actually not going to recommend this film.
I would be worried if this came up with conversation with someone random.
I mean, it would be funny and amusing, but it'd probably be few and far between of why the Omen would ever come up in a random like even a pop culture conversation, really.
All right, so
yeah, I respect that, Chris. Very, very nice.
No, but you guys, I mean, you all made a really good point. I do remember this film, but I've not recommended it to anybody up until now.
Fair enough.
Okay, so
what do we got?
Going down the scores. As you could see, the podcast was then cut off.
There has been a history of odd occurrences regarding Omen films, and I can't imagine why our podcast should have been any different, especially since it was recorded in August. For an October release, I think we may have offended somebody, something, somewhere in nature. So I'm going to quick go over the scores. Ian, Scott, and Steve-O each gave it a 5. I gave it a 6 because of the strength of one supporting character. Seemed like a good idea at the time. We all agreed that the plot was worthy of 2, and 2 only. We all agreed the anti-corporate theme was right on the money, and we all gave the Son of Satan as portrayed by Sam Neill a 1, along with the over-the-top dialogue. We felt antagonist was weak because when you're going up against the Son of Satan, especially the Son of Satan, played by Mr. Sam Neill, you have to do better than they did. You just have to, in every way, shape, and form, tactics, intelligence, and most of all, charisma. So that leaves us with an aggregate score of 5.25. With that said, I will not belabor this point and will say that I've been Chris Morgan, along with my minions, Jonathan Ian Manzer, Scott Thurlow, and Stephen Hermosi. I bid you a good night. Happy Halloween.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.